What if I told you that within the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace, behind the carefully polished smiles and centuries-old traditions, there lurks a ticking time bomb, and it has nothing to do with politics, coronations, or public opinion polls? What if I told you that this time, the threat doesn't come from Parliament, the press, or even foreign governments, but from within the family itself? Prince Harry, the once beloved spare, is said to hold files so sensitive, so damaging, that they could blow the doors off the monarchy as we know it. And Meghan Markle, the woman who stormed into the royal narrative like a hurricane, is allegedly threatening to unleash them if her looming divorce battle with Harry turns bitter. It sounds like the script of a Netflix thriller, doesn't it? A royal love story turned power struggle. A family feud with the crown itself dangling in the balance. But here's the chilling truth. Whispers of the royal blackmail files are spreading, and each whisper seems darker than the last. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Now, let's pause for just a moment. Ask yourself, why does this story matter right now? Haven't we seen Harry and Meghan make headlines for years? Haven't we already read their interviews, watched their docuseries, and sifted through their tell-all book? What could possibly remain that would still shock the world? That's the very heart of the intrigue. Because if the rumors are even partially true, then what's been revealed so far has only been the tip of a very large, very dangerous iceberg. Imagine secret recordings, conversations never meant for the public, hidden documents about royal finances, private feuds, or explosive truths about the inner workings of the monarchy. Imagine Meghan holding these files as her last line of defense, her ace card in the event of a marriage collapse. And imagine Harry, torn between love and loyalty, sitting on the most dangerous stash of information in modern royal history. Think back to Harry's past. His mother, Princess Diana, often hinted at hidden truths, secrets she feared would destroy her if spoken out loud. Diana famously said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage." Now, decades later, her youngest son stands accused of inheriting not only her pain, but her instinct for survival through evidence and recordings. Could it be possible that Harry learned from Diana's tragic story, that if you hold the truth, you hold power? Let me ask you this directly. If your marriage was crumbling and the other side had everything to lose, would you risk exposing secrets that could topple an institution centuries in the making? Would you really press play on recordings that could fracture the very image of your family forever? Or would you hold them tightly, praying you'd never be forced to use them? Here's where the drama deepens. Meghan Markle, always accused of playing chess while others play checkers, allegedly has no intention of walking away quietly. Divorce for her isn't just about emotional fallout. It's about control, leverage, and reputation. If these files exist, they're not just insurance for Harry, they're ammunition for Meghan. She knows the palace's worst nightmare isn't scandal itself. It's scandal with proof. Picture the panic inside royal corridors. Senior advisors whispering behind closed doors, terrified that their darkest secrets might one day hit the tabloids. Prince William pacing, fuming at the idea that his brother could hold the monarchy hostage with a handful of recordings. King Charles, caught in the storm, wondering if his son has become the family's biggest liability. And in the shadows, Meghan, allegedly reminding everyone that she's not the one to be underestimated. But this isn't just about personal vendettas. No, this is about legacy, about the survival of the monarchy itself. Because while Meghan threatens divorce and Harry clings to his arsenal of secrets, the world watches, hungry for the next scandal. And the palace? They know that one wrong move could set off a chain reaction from which the crown might never recover. And isn't that the cruel irony? For centuries, the monarchy has thrived on carefully curated images, fairy tale weddings, golden jubilees, parades of pomp and circumstance. But behind the curtains, the whispers have always been there. Affairs, cover-ups, betrayals. What makes this moment different is that the whispers are said to be recorded, documented, packaged in a way that could leave no room for denials. The public loves a scandal. We feast on the downfall of the mighty. But when the scandal involves people we grew up watching, people whose faces are on our coins and whose stories shaped our childhood fairy tales, the betrayal cuts deeper. That's why this story matters now. Because Meghan's threat isn't just about ending a marriage. It's about ending the illusion. And so here we are. at the precipice of a story that could define the next chapter of royal history. Divorce papers may be filed. Lawyers may gather around boardroom tables. Advisors may scramble to contain the fallout. But in the middle of it all, there's a vault of secrets, Harry's alleged blackmail files, that could set fire to the institution itself. Let me turn this to you, the audience. If these files were real, if Meghan really has access to them, and if Harry really kept them as protection, what would you want to see revealed? The truth about family rifts? Hidden scandals from decades past? Shocking financial dealings? Or perhaps something even darker? Because here's the kicker. No matter how much the palace denies, no matter how tightly they lock their lips, the mere rumor of these files is enough to make the entire monarchy sweat. And isn't that the mark of true power? This is the story of love turned weapon, of family turned battlefield, of secrets turned currency. And as much as the palace wishes it could silence the noise, the truth is already out there, lurking in the corners, waiting for the right moment to strike. But this is just the beginning. Because if you think Meghan's divorce thread is shocking on its own, wait until you hear what's said to be inside those files. And what comes next will make you question everything you thought you knew about the royals. The words hit like thunder. Meghan Markle was threatening divorce. Not just whispers in the tabloids, not just vague speculation in glossy magazines. This time, the rumor carried teeth. Allegedly, Meghan had gone beyond the brink of private tension and into public warfare. But the true bombshell wasn't that she wanted out. No, the true shock was what she might take with her if she went. Files, recordings, secrets that could rip Buckingham Palace apart. Think about it for a second. Divorce in any family is messy. Custody battles, money disputes, bitter words behind closed doors. Now imagine that same divorce. But it's not just your spouse across the table. It's the royal family, the institution that thrives on image, stability, and tradition. Meghan wasn't simply threatening to leave Harry. She was allegedly threatening to tear the whole facade down with her. But why now? Why this moment? After years of public drama, accusations, interviews, and carefully staged silences, what made Meghan allegedly decide that this was the point to raise the nuclear option? Some say it was about control. After all, Meghan has always been painted by critics as a strategist, a woman who knows how to use timing to her advantage. Just when the public's interest in her wanes, another revelation emerges. Just when she seems cornered, she plays her next card. Divorce talk. Then, could be her ultimate play. A way of saying, if you think you can silence me, think again. I can silence you. Others suggest it was about survival. That behind the smiling photographs and high-gloss PR campaigns, Meghan and Harry's marriage has been crumbling under the weight of pressures we can only imagine. From financial instability to constant media attacks, to the emotional strain of being cut off from family ties, maybe Meghan's alleged threat was simply the result of years of frustration boiling over. But here's where it gets darker. Divorce in the royal world doesn't happen like divorce in the real world. This isn't just splitting a house or dividing bank accounts. This is about titles, reputations, access to royal privileges, and above all, silence. The royals are experts at locking stories away, at burying scandals beneath layers of denials and NDAs. For Meghan, though, that silence could be weaponized. Divorce could become her opportunity not only to free herself, but to unleash everything the royals never wanted us to know. Imagine for a moment the conversations happening behind those palace doors. Advisors urging King Charles to act swiftly, to contain Meghan before her threats became reality. Prince William reportedly furious at the idea that his brother's marriage could once again overshadow the monarchy. The fear wasn't just about losing Harry and Meghan for good. It was about what they might reveal in the process. And Harry? Here's the twist. He wasn't just a victim caught in the middle. Allegedly, he's the one holding the key to the most explosive secrets of all. Those infamous royal blackmail files. Documents, recordings, details so sensitive that even the suggestion of their existence is enough to keep the royals awake at night. Files that Meghan could weaponize in divorce court or, even worse, leak to the press if she chose to fight dirty. Ask yourself this. If you were Meghan, staring down a divorce from a man tied to the most famous family on earth, wouldn't you use every piece of leverage you had to secure your future? If you were Harry, cornered between protecting your wife and protecting your bloodline, wouldn't you start to wonder which side of history you were about to fall on? The threat of divorce didn't just shake Harry and Meghan's marriage. It shook the entire monarchy. Suddenly, the story wasn't about two people falling out of love. It was about the potential implosion of centuries of carefully guarded tradition. It was about the survival of the crown in the face of modern scandal. And what about the public? While some fans sympathized with Meghan, seeing her as a woman finally breaking free from years of unfair treatment, others saw it as pure manipulation. To them, Meghan's alleged threat wasn't a cry for help. It was a calculated power move. A way to say, if I can't win with love, I'll win with fear. But here's the part that makes this all the more chilling. This was only the beginning. Divorce threats, blackmail files, whispers of recordings. It was enough to send the tabloids into overdrive. Yet, insiders warned that what Meghan had allegedly threatened next was far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. Because the real power didn't lie in walking away. The real power lay in what she could expose. And once Meghan hinted at using that power, the palace knew they weren't just dealing with a broken marriage. They were staring down the barrel of a royal crisis unlike any other. But this was just the opening shot. Because what Meghan threatened next would terrify the royals even more. They called it a myth, a conspiracy, a rumor blown out of proportion by tabloids desperate for clicks. But in hushed tones behind palace doors, the whispers carried weight. The royal blackmail files. The very phrase was enough to send a chill down the spine of those who understood what it could mean. Now, let me ask you, have you ever wondered why the royals, despite all their scandals, always seem to survive? From affairs splashed across front pages to tragic deaths that shook the world, the institution endures. But what if I told you that endurance wasn't always about resilience? What if it was about control, about holding evidence, stories, and secrets so dark they could never see the light of day? That's where the story of these alleged files begins. According to sources close to Harry, the files weren't something he stumbled upon overnight. They were built, piece by piece, over years. Some say it started as protection. After all, Harry grew up in a world where cameras lurked in bushes, microphones caught stray words, and the media hunted him like prey. He learned early that information was currency. If the press could use it to destroy him, then surely he could use it to protect himself. But protection from what? From whom? Some point to Diana. His mother knew all too well that power in the royal world wasn't just about titles. It was about secrets. Diana herself hinted in interviews that she had recorded conversations, kept notes, documented her suspicions. After her death, those close to her whispered that she had left behind more than memories. Could Harry have inherited not just her pain, but her methods? Could the files be his way of making sure her fate would never be repeated? Others argue that the files weren't about the past, they were about the present. Think of all the fractures in Harry's relationship with the royal family. The icy distance from William, the mistrust from Charles, the constant battles with palace officials. Each conflict could have added another piece to the puzzle, another entry in the files. And then there's Meghan. For years, she has claimed the palace worked against her, spreading false stories, allowing the press to tear her apart. If Meghan believed she was under attack, wouldn't it make sense for her to push Harry to document the truth? To create their own record of the lies, betrayals, and whispered conversations behind closed doors. But here's the dangerous part. These files weren't just about Harry and Meghan. They were said to contain information about the monarchy itself. Rumors of secret financial dealings. Allegations of affairs that never made the headlines. Internal power struggles that, if exposed, could turn public opinion overnight. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer panic if recordings of private royal arguments were ever leaked. The world hearing William shouting at Harry. The king begging for silence. Advisors plotting strategy like generals in wartime. What would such recordings do to the royal image? Could the monarchy survive the stripping away of its mystique, its aura of control? Now, stop and think. Why do you think these rumors gain traction now, at this precise moment? Why not during Harry's memoir release? Why not during the Oprah interview? Some believe it's because Meghan herself only recently discovered the true depth of what Harry allegedly held. And once she knew, the files transformed from insurance into leverage. That's the terrifying part for the palace. Files in Harry's hands are dangerous, yes, but files in Meghan's hands are catastrophic. Divorce changes the equation. Suddenly, Secrets once meant for protection could become weapons in a war. Ask yourself, if you were Meghan and you knew the royal family wanted you silenced, would you hold back? Or would you hint, just enough, that you had the power to bring everything crashing down? The palace's worst nightmare isn't speculation. It's proof. Proof that strips away the veil of tradition, leaving only scandal in its place. Proof that could forever change how the world views the royal family. And that's exactly why the files matter. Because even if no one ever sees them, their rumored existence shifts the balance of power. Meghan doesn't need to show them. She only needs to remind everyone that she could. Now imagine being a royal advisor, hearing Meghan's alleged threats. Wouldn't you wonder just how deep those files go? Wouldn't you ask yourself, what if there's something in there that could truly destroy us? Because that's the looming question. Not if the files exist, but what they contain. And when Meghan got wind of what might be inside them, everything about her strategy changed. Because the files weren't just Harry's shield anymore. They were Meghan's sword. And once that realization hit, the palace understood the war was only just beginning. But Meghan's power play was about to go even further, shocking not just the royals, but even those closest to her. She had always been underestimated. From the moment Meghan Markle walked into the royal world, she was branded as an outsider, an actress, an opportunist, a commoner who could never truly understand the weight of the crown. But in the high-stakes game of survival, Meghan proved again and again that she was no mere supporting character. She was a strategist. And when the rumors of Harry's secret blackmail files reached her ears, Meghan allegedly recognized something no one else had dared to say out loud. These files weren't just a shield. They could be a weapon. Now think about that for a moment. Power in the royal family has always been about perception, titles, rituals, public adoration. But Meghan? She didn't grow up under the gilded rules of the monarchy. She grew up in Hollywood, where power isn't about bloodlines, it's about leverage. A phone call, a recording, a leaked document. Meghan allegedly saw the files not as dusty insurance papers, but as the perfect card to play if the palace ever tried to push her out. And the timing couldn't have been sharper. Divorce whispers were already in the air. Tension with Harry was spilling out of their California mansion, and public opinion was swinging back and forth like a pendulum. Meghan, according to insiders, decided to seize the moment. If the royal family thought they could control her narrative, she would remind them she had the ultimate trump card. Here's the question that should haunt anyone who's been following this saga. Was this ever about love anymore? Or was it about leverage? Did Meghan marry Harry for romance? Or did she marry into the one institution where scandal could become her most valuable currency? Critics point to her past moves. Suing tabloids, crafting explosive interviews, releasing a 6-part Netflix series. Each time, Meghan didn't just tell her story, she weaponized it. And now, with the files allegedly in play, the stakes rose higher than ever. Because for Meghan, divorce didn't have to mean defeat. Divorce could mean power. A chance to redefine herself not as the woman who left the royals, but as the woman who exposed them. Let's pause for a second. Imagine you're Meghan. You're facing the most powerful family in Britain. You've been painted as manipulative, as a liar, as a schemer. What's your best move? You could stay silent and fade into obscurity, or you could flip the script, using the very files your husband collected as both shield and sword. Wouldn't you at least consider it? And that's where the true genius, or danger, of Meghan's alleged power play lies. She didn't need to release anything. She didn't need to show the world a single recording. The mere suggestion that she could was enough to tilt the scales. The royals knew that if Meghan went to war with them armed with proof, their centuries-old fortress of secrecy might crumble overnight. Picture the reaction inside the palace. William, the future king, reportedly furious at the idea that Meghan might dangle his private life over the public. Charles, facing the twilight of his reign, quietly panicking that his legacy could be defined not by stability, but by scandal. Advisors scribbling crisis management plans, whispering about potential payoffs, NDAs, desperate bargains. Meanwhile, Meghan is said to have stayed calm, calculated. While the royals fretted, she played the long game. She let the rumors swirl, let the speculation build, never confirming, never denying. Because in a world obsessed with scandal, mystery is MO. But here's where it gets truly ironic. Meghan's critics accused her of trying to destroy the monarchy, while her supporters praised her as a woman who refused to be silenced. Both sides may have been right, because in turning the files into leverage, Meghan wasn't just protecting herself. She was reshaping the entire dynamic between her, Harry, and the crown. Let me ask you directly. If you had the power to expose the most famous family in the world, would you use it? Or would you hold it back, knowing the mere threat might give you more influence than the act itself? Meghan seemed to understand what many inside the palace did not. Exposure is a one-time weapon. Once you release the secrets, they're gone. But the threat of exposure? That lasts forever. And that's why her power play terrified the royals even more than the files themselves. Because Meghan wasn't acting impulsively. She was playing chess. Every move deliberate. Every rumor carefully allowed to leak. Every silence calculated to create suspense. But there was one thing Meghan didn't count on. She wasn't the only one aware of the files. Others knew. Others wanted them. And in the shadows, people began to circle, waiting for their chance to use the files for their own gain. And that's when Meghan's power play transformed from leverage into danger. Because once the existence of those files reached more ears than hers and Harry's, the battle for control took on a life of its own. Panic. That was the word whispered in hushed tones through the ancient corridors of Buckingham Palace. The kind of panic not seen since the death of Diana, not even during the chaos of Megxit. Because this time, the threat wasn't from the press or from the public, it was from within. Meghan Markle had allegedly raised the specter of divorce, and worse, the possibility of unleashing Harry's so-called royal blackmail files. For the monarchy, it was the nightmare scenario they had always feared. Behind the glossy smiles of public appearances, the palace was in meltdown. Senior courtiers rushed to emergency meetings. Advisors drafted responses that would never see daylight. Every headline was scrutinized, every leak dissected. The royals knew something the public didn't. Even the rumor of these files was enough to destabilize the institution. Now, think about this for a moment. The monarchy has survived wars, abdications, and scandals that would have shattered lesser dynasties. But the difference this time was proof. For centuries, scandal could be smoothed over, denied, or buried under layers of tradition. But if Harry's files contained real recordings, actual documents, undeniable evidence of infighting or corruption, the crown's greatest strength, its mystique, could shatter overnight. Imagine King Charles in this moment. He has waited his entire life to wear the crown, finally ascending after decades in the shadows. And now, barely into his reign, he's staring down a crisis that could define his monarchy. Sources claim he was advised to contain Meghan quickly, to cut off the threat before it grew. But how do you contain a woman who thrives on public exposure, who has already proven she will not be silenced? Then there's Prince William, always seen as the dutiful heir, the steady hand ready to guide the monarchy into a new age. But William has his own scars from the Harry-Meghan saga. The brothers' relationship is fractured, perhaps beyond repair. Now, William is said to have been livid, furious at the idea that his brother might be sitting on files that could damage not just the family, but his own future reign. Behind closed doors, William reportedly pressed for action. Silence, he argued, wasn't enough this time. The monarchy needed a strategy, and strategy became the palace's obsession. Could they outmaneuver Meghan by controlling the narrative? Could they quietly negotiate her silence in the event of a divorce? Or was the only option to prepare for the worst, global humiliation? Let me ask you this. If you were sitting in that palace war room, what would you do? Pay Meghan off and risk looking weak? Call her bluff and risk exposure? Or try to smear her before she smeared you? There are no easy answers when the enemy isn't an outsider, it's family. And let's not forget the staff, the royal aides, the private secretaries, the communications officers who had been burned by Harry and Meghan before. Some reportedly feared that they themselves were caught on tape, recorded in moments of frustration or arrogance. The panic wasn't just about the monarchy's reputation. It was about careers, legacies, lives being destroyed if the truth ever leaked. Picture it, decades of carefully crafted PR reduced to rubble by a single leaked file. A recording of Charles saying the wrong thing in private. A document showing the palace covering up a scandal. An argument between William and Harry that makes headlines for years. The monarchy, for all its pomp and circumstance, is made of people, and people make mistakes. That's why the palace was terrified. Because if Meghan had the files, she could strip away the last defense of the royals, their ability to deny. And without denial, without doubt, the monarchy becomes just another celebrity family, flawed, broken, human. Inside those walls, the panic spread like wildfire. Advisors feared a Diana-level crisis, one that could spiral out of control. But unlike Diana, Meghan wasn't a tragic victim. She was a fighter, a player who knew exactly how to wield public opinion. And that made her far more dangerous. And so, the palace braced itself. Meetings stretched late into the night. Contingency plans were drafted. Everyone wondered the same thing. What exactly was in those files, and how far was Meghan willing to go? Because in the middle of all the whispers, one shocking revelation began to surface. A revelation about Harry's files that no one, neither the palace nor Meghan, was fully prepared to face. And when that truth came out, it would push Buckingham Palace into full crisis mode. They weren't supposed to exist. Not in the modern age, not in the House of Windsor, not within the walls of Buckingham Palace where discretion is a matter of survival. But according to the whispers swirling around Harry and Meghan's fractured marriage, they did exist. Recordings, secret ones, snippets of conversations that were never meant to leave the privacy of palatial rooms and gilded halls. And if even a fraction of these rumors were true, the royals knew they had a problem that could not be contained. Now let me ask you, what would you do if you had recordings of your family's darkest arguments? Would you bury them, lock them away, pretend they never existed? Or would you keep them close, knowing that one day they might protect you or destroy everything? For Harry, the story of the alleged recordings starts long before Meghan. He grew up in a house where privacy didn't exist. Every smile, every stumble, every slip of the tongue became tomorrow's front-page headline. He watched his mother suffer under the weight of press intrusion. He saw her break, saw her fight back, saw her use her own words as weapons when the institution tried to silence her. Is it really so hard to believe that Harry learned from her? That he decided if his family wouldn't protect him, he would protect himself? According to palace insiders, Harry began recording as a form of insurance. Not necessarily with malice, but with fear. Fear of being cornered. Fear of being misquoted. Fear of being betrayed. Imagine sitting in meetings where powerful people twist your words, then release carefully sanitized versions to the press. Wouldn't you be tempted to hit record, just so you had proof of what was really said? But here's the twist. Once Meghan entered the picture, the dynamic allegedly changed. Meghan came from Hollywood, a world where every meeting, every negotiation, every deal has a paper trail. You don't rely on trust. You rely on receipts. Meghan, critics say, encouraged Harry to document everything. Every slight, every tense exchange, every promise broken behind palace doors. And soon, what began as Harry's private insurance ballooned into something far more dangerous, an archive. Now picture the kind of conversations that might have been captured. Heated arguments between Harry and William, where tempers flared and years of resentment boiled over. Charles pleading with his son to toe the line. Advisors strategizing how to manage Meghan's image in the press. Even quiet confessions from staff, unaware that their words might one day become headlines. Do you see the danger? For centuries, the monarchy's strength has been its mystique, the idea that the royal family lives above the chaos of ordinary life. But if recordings existed showing them bickering, panicking, even scheming, that mystique would shatter in an instant. The royals would no longer be icons. They'd be just another dysfunctional family, their private mess laid bare for the world to judge. And that's what terrified the palace most. Rumors alone could be dismissed. Stories could be spun. But audio is undeniable. A recording of William's voice, Charles's tone, Meghan's accusations, it's evidence you can't rewrite. Let's pause here. Ask yourself, if these recordings surface tomorrow, how would you react? Would you be shocked? Or would you say, I knew it all along? That's the power of recordings. They don't just reveal secrets. They validate suspicions. They give conspiracy theories teeth. And Meghan knew this. According to those close to her, she allegedly recognized the recordings for what they were, leverage. Proof that the palace could not deny. Proof that, if pushed, could silence even the loudest critics. Divorce, in her hands, wasn't just an exit. It was a negotiation, with recordings as her currency. But here's where the story turns darker. The files weren't just about family fights. Whispers suggested some recordings touched on finances, on alliances with politicians, on decisions the royals never wanted dissected in public. If even a fraction of that were true, then Meghan held a weapon capable of sparking not just scandal, but political fallout. And the palace knew it. They knew that once word spread of secret recordings, it wasn't just about Meghan and Harry anymore. Journalists would hunt. Enemies of the monarchy would circle. Allies would panic. The institution itself would be at risk. Yet, despite all the panic, the most chilling part of this story wasn't the recordings we know about. It was the ones no one could confirm. Because in the absence of certainty, imagination does the rest. What if Meghan had tapes of Charles in a moment of weakness? What if Harry recorded a fight with William that confirmed every rumor of a royal feud? What if the Queen herself, before her death, had been captured saying something explosive? The possibilities alone were enough to terrify the palace. And isn't that the cruel genius of recordings? You don't even have to release them. You only have to let people know they exist. But here's the cliffhanger. The recordings were only one piece of the puzzle. Because the most dangerous evidence in Harry's files wasn't what people could hear. It was what people could read. And when whispers about the documents, those hidden papers, those buried truths, began to surface, the crisis reached an entirely new level. She wasn't done yet. Divorce rumors alone had rattled the palace. The mere suggestion of secret recordings had set Buckingham's gilded halls on fire. But Meghan Markle, ever the strategist, wasn't about to stop there. According to insiders, she was already planning her next move, a step so calculated, so deliberate, that even those closest to her were stunned. And here's the chilling part. Meghan didn't need to play all her cards at once. She only needed to remind the palace that she had them. Every silence, every carefully placed leak, every raised eyebrow in an interview was designed to leave one lingering question in the royals' minds. What will she do next? Now, think about Meghan's public history. From her lawsuits against tabloids to her sit-down with Oprah, she has shown again and again that she doesn't shy away from confrontation. She doesn't just play defense, she goes on the attack. And this time, with the looming threat of divorce, she had the perfect stage to escalate the drama. So what was Meghan's alleged next move? It wasn't a public outburst. It wasn't a sudden press conference or a Netflix bombshell. It was subtler, more dangerous. She began, according to whispers, laying the groundwork legally and publicly. Divorce, after all, is as much a negotiation as it is a breakup. Meghan understood that better than anyone. Behind closed doors, she reportedly began consulting with lawyers, high-powered attorneys skilled not only in divorce law, but in media management. These weren't just people who could help her win custody or secure assets. These were experts in weaponizing reputation, in turning evidence into bargaining chips. Imagine those strategy sessions, teams of lawyers flipping through binders, analyzing what would happen if recordings or files ever came to light. At the same time, Meghan allegedly worked her public angle. Appearances were carefully curated. Every smile, every outfit, every word in interviews seemed designed to send a message. I'm calm. I'm in control. I have nothing to fear. But to the palace, that calmness was terrifying. Because it didn't look like someone crumbling under pressure. It looked like someone holding all the cards. And here's where it gets fascinating. Meghan knew she couldn't just fight a private battle. She had to win the court of public opinion. And public opinion has always been her strongest weapon. Think back. Every time she spoke out, the world listened. The Oprah interview? Headlines for months. The Netflix docuseries? Millions of viewers. The memoir? A publishing phenomenon. Meghan understood something the royals struggled to grasp. In the age of social media, truth isn't what you can prove, it's what you can make people believe. So while the palace scrambled to contain rumors, Meghan played a different game. She let the speculation work for her. Every time a story surfaced about secret files or recordings, she didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either. She just smiled. And that smile spoke louder than any statement could. Let me ask you this. If you were Meghan, staring down a divorce from one of the most famous families in the world, wouldn't you use every ounce of leverage you had? Wouldn't you build your strategy step by step, knowing that one wrong move could cost you everything, but one right move could secure your legacy forever? Her critics saw it as manipulation. Her supporters saw it as survival. But either way, Meghan's alleged next move was clear. She wasn't going to walk away quietly. She was going to remind the royals, subtly but unmistakably, that she had the power to end them if she chose to. And here's where the emotional spikes come in. Imagine the tension in Harry's world. On one side, a wife preparing for war. On the other, a family terrified of destruction. Harry, caught in the middle, watching as Meghan tightened her grip on the files that were once his. What must that have felt like? To see the secrets you collected for protection now being repurposed as ammunition in a marital war? But Meghan wasn't finished. After securing her legal and PR strategies, after sending quiet but unmistakable signals to the palace, she allegedly went one step further. She began to escalate the pressure, not through leaks or interviews, but through whispered warnings. Subtle comments to allies, hints dropped to journalists, statements that sounded innocent but carried loaded meanings. And those whispers did exactly what Meghan intended. They ignited fear. Because when Meghan suggested she could go further, the question wasn't if she would. It was when. And so, the stage was set. Meghan's next move wasn't about evidence. It was about fear. About letting everyone know she was ready to use the files, the recordings, the documents, if she was pushed too far. But here's the twist. Meghan wasn't the only one under pressure. Because as she escalated, Harry himself reached a breaking point. And Harry's internal battle, between loyalty to Meghan and loyalty to the crown, was about to tear him apart. It was the choice Harry had always feared. On one side stood Meghan, the woman he had chosen against all odds, the woman he had left his family, his country, and his royal duties to protect. On the other side stood the crown, the monarchy he was born into, the bloodline that defined his very existence, the institution his mother once fought against but also loved in her own way. Now, as divorce whispers grew louder and Meghan allegedly prepared to weaponize the royal blackmail files, Harry was torn apart by an impossible question. Where did his loyalty truly lie? Let's start with the personal. Harry had lived a lifetime of trauma before Meghan ever entered the picture. He lost his mother in the most public, devastating way imaginable. He grew up knowing that his grief was a spectacle, that the world mourned alongside him, but also dissected every flicker of emotion he showed. When Meghan came into his life, she represented something no royal duty ever gave him: escape, freedom, a chance at love untainted by the weight of the crown. That's why he clung to her so fiercely. That's why he broke centuries of tradition to stand by her side. But what happens when the very woman you gave everything up for becomes the one threatening to use your deepest secrets against the family you left behind? That's where Harry found himself. Torn, conflicted, struggling with the realization that the files he had once collected as protection could now become the very weapon that might destroy his father, his brother, and the institution he was raised to revere. Think about the irony here. Harry, the rebel prince, the spare, who always felt overlooked, suddenly held the most powerful hand in royal history. Yet that power wasn't liberating, it was crushing. Because no matter what he chose, someone he loved would pay the price. Picture the Knights in their California home. Meghan, frustrated, insisting that they had to fight back harder, reminding Harry that the palace would never protect them. Harry, pacing, torn between anger at the royals who pushed him away and fear of the consequences if Meghan followed through on her threats. Did he argue with her? Did he beg her to hold back? Or did he, in moments of weakness, confess that part of him agreed the files might be the only way to finally be heard? And what about William? The brothers' relationship was already in tatters, but imagine Harry knowing that somewhere in those recordings could be his brother's voice. Angry, cruel, perhaps even damning. Did he want to protect William from exposure? Or did years of resentment tempt him to let it happen? To let the world see the future king's flaws? This was Harry's torment. Love for Meghan pulling him one way, loyalty to his bloodline pulling him another. And let's not forget the public. Harry had always cared what people thought of him. The party prince, the soldier, the grieving son, the husband. Every chapter of his life had been scrutinized. Now, he knew that if Meghan went forward with the files, the public wouldn't just judge the monarchy, they'd judge him. He would forever be branded as the man who betrayed his family, Ask yourself, what would you do in Harry's place? Would you side with your spouse, the person you vowed to protect, even if it meant destroying your family? Or would you side with your blood, even if it meant sacrificing the woman who stood by you when the world turned against you? There's no easy answer, is there? The emotional toll on Harry must have been immense. We've seen glimpses of it already. His interviews filled with contradictions, his memoirs swinging between affection and fury, his body language betraying exhaustion. He looked like a man pulled in two directions, unable to fully commit to either. And that's because he was. Some insiders claim Harry tried to mediate, to calm Meghan's fury while reassuring his family that she wouldn't go too far. But deep down, did he believe that? Or did he know that Meghan, once pushed to this point, was unstoppable? And here's where the tragedy of Harry's position becomes clear. For all his rebellion, for all his bold choices, he was still trapped. No matter which side he chose, he risked losing everything. Choose Meghan, and he risked burning bridges with his father and brother forever. Choose the crown, and he risked destroying the marriage he fought so hard to defend. It's a cruel paradox, isn't it? The files that were supposed to protect him now became the chains that bound him. And the woman he loved, the one he thought would set him free, was now the one holding those chains tight. But Harry's torment wasn't just private. Behind palace doors, lawyers and advisors were already preparing for the next step. If Meghan and Harry truly went down the road of divorce, the battlefield wouldn't just be emotional, it would be legal. And in a courtroom, those files wouldn't just be leverage. They could become evidence. And that was a nightmare neither Meghan nor the palace was ready to face. Because when the divorce battle turned legal, the secrets inside those files would finally begin to surface. Courtrooms are not built for royalty. They strip away the gilded walls, the velvet curtains, the centuries of mystique. In their place, hard benches, black robes, cold microphones. Justice doesn't bow to crowns, it demands evidence. And that, right there, was the palace's worst nightmare. Because if Meghan Markle followed through with her divorce threats, the battle would not just be emotional or reputational. It would be fought in the open, on legal paper, in front of judges, under the scrutiny of a public hungry for every detail. And in divorce, evidence is everything. Think about what happens in any high-profile split. Assets are divided. Custody is fought over. Each side brings proof of wrongdoing, of mistreatment, of lies. Now magnify that 100 times. This wasn't just any marriage. This was Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. The couple who had already rocked the monarchy once, now threatening to do it again. Behind the scenes, lawyers would prepare for war. Meghan's team, razor-sharp, Hollywood-hardened, experts at weaponizing image. They'd argue she had been mistreated, silenced, and forced into a corner. They'd lean on her story of survival, of being hounded by press and abandoned by the crown. And if whispers are true, they'd have something far more dangerous at their disposal. Harry's so-called royal blackmail files. Now ask yourself, what happens if those files, which until now existed only as rumor, are introduced as exhibits in court? A recording of William shouting in anger. A document showing the palace manipulating the press. A transcript of Charles worrying about scandal. Once evidence enters a courtroom, it becomes public record. No spin, no palace statement, no PR firm can bury it. It lives forever. That's why the monarchy feared the legal battlefield more than the tabloids. The press thrives on speculation. A courtroom thrives on proof. And if Meghan's lawyers believed the files could help her case, they wouldn't hesitate to use them. Imagine the fallout. The monarchy's deepest secrets dissected not by courtiers in candlelit rooms, but by lawyers in fluorescent-lit courtrooms. Headlines not about gowns or parades, but about betrayal, abuse of power, maybe even corruption. The crown itself reduced to testimony and cross-examination. And what about Harry? He wouldn't just be a witness. He'd be at the center of it all. On one hand, his family, begging him to protect the institution, to bury the files, to shield the monarchy. On the other hand, his estranged wife, demanding he stand by her, to let the truth come out in the name of justice. Picture Harry sitting there, torn apart as lawyers argue over the files he once believed would keep him safe. Do you see the tragic irony? What began as protection had now become potential evidence. The very shield Harry built for himself might now become the sword that gutted the crown. and the stakes would be higher than money or titles. Custody of Archie and Lilibet would hang in the balance. Meghan's legal team could argue that the palace environment was toxic, unsafe for children, and point to recordings or documents as proof. The royals, in turn, could argue Meghan's instability, her alleged threats, her hunger for control. Every word, every file, every secret would become a weapon. And remember this, in divorce law, leverage is everything. Even the threat of introducing the files in court would be enough to force the royals to the table. Deals might be struck in backrooms. Silence might be bought with money, with property, with concessions we may never hear about. But the mere possibility that the files could go public meant the palace was negotiating from weakness. Let's pause here. Imagine you're King Charles. Do you risk a courtroom showdown that could unravel centuries of royal image building? Or do you pay Meghan off quietly, knowing the public would still sense something had been buried? Both paths are poison. That's the bind Meghan's alleged legal strategy created. But there's another danger, one even Meghan may not have anticipated. Once the files entered a courtroom, they wouldn't just be hers anymore. Lawyers, judges, clerks, journalists, all could gain access. Control would vanish. The files could leak, not on Meghan's terms, but on someone else's. And once out, they'd never go back in the box. That's why insiders whispered that the palace began to panic in earnest as divorce rumors thickened. It wasn't the scandal of separation. Royals had divorced before, Charles and Diana, Andrew and Sarah. The monarchy had survived. But this was different. This wasn't just about love lost. This was about secrets exposed. And then came the real bombshell. Because according to whispers, when Meghan's lawyers began preparing their case, they discovered something buried in the files that even she hadn't anticipated. Something darker. Something that could shake not only the monarchy, but the very foundations of public trust in it. And when that discovery surfaced, even Meghan herself was said to be shaken. The palace feared it. The courtiers dreaded it. And Meghan, some say, quietly welcomed it. The moment the divorce whispers and the blackmail file rumors collided with the press, it was inevitable. The media war exploded. At first, it began with speculation. Headlines screaming, "Meghan threatens divorce." Tabloids salivating over the phrase, "royal blackmail files." But as reporters dug deeper, leaks started slipping through the cracks. Hints of what might be in those files, whispers of secret recordings, suggestions of hidden documents that could shake the monarchy to its core. The press didn't need confirmation. They only needed possibility. And possibility sells. Now let me ask you, when you hear secret royal files, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Affairs? Finances? Betrayals? The brilliance of a media war is that it doesn't require proof. It requires imagination. And the public's imagination did the rest. Suddenly, every news outlet wanted a piece of the story. Paparazzi camped outside Meghan's home, hoping for a glimpse of tension on her face. Tabloid journalists scrambled for quotes from friends of the couple. Even respected outlets, the ones that usually distanced themselves from royal gossip, started publishing cautious think pieces about what a Meghan-Harry divorce could mean for the monarchy. Meanwhile, Meghan allegedly played her part to perfection. She didn't confirm. She didn't deny. Instead, she let the speculation build. Every time she appeared in public, smiling faintly, looking poised, the message was clear: I am calm. They are the ones panicking. And panic they did. Inside the palace, advisors scrambled to counter the narrative. Leaks began flowing from the other side, stories painting Meghan as manipulative, unstable, power-hungry. Headlines like "Palace Sources," "Meghan holding family hostage," or "Royal aides fear Meghan's next move" weren't accidents. They were deliberate plans, part of the palace's counterattack in the information war. It was a clash of strategies, Meghan's silence and mystery versus the palace's smears and leaks. And who won? The media, of course, because nothing drives clicks and views like two sides at war. But here's where it got darker. Journalists started digging not just into Meghan and Harry's present, but their pasts. Old friends were approached. Former staff were offered money for stories. Every argument, every cold glance, every rumor of infidelity was suddenly on the table. The media didn't care if the files were real. They were real enough in the court of public opinion. And Harry? Caught in the middle, once again. Imagine his torment, watching the woman he loved painted as a blackmailer, watching his family accused of hiding corruption, and knowing that the storm outside was fueled by files that may or may not ever see the light of day. But here's the cruel irony. In a media war, truth doesn't matter. Perception does. And perception was spiraling out of control. Supporters of Meghan saw her as a victim again, a woman fighting back against an institution desperate to silence her. Critics saw her as the villain, a manipulative outsider who had ensnared Harry and was now threatening to burn the monarchy to the ground. Let me ask you directly, whose side would you take if the files ever surfaced? Would you believe Meghan, the outsider who claimed to have been mistreated? Or would you side with the royals, the centuries-old institution trying to protect its legacy? That's the question that divided the world. And then came the journalists. Some of them weren't content to speculate. They wanted proof. Investigative reporters began digging, chasing leads about what the files might contain. Were there recordings? Documents? Hidden caches of emails? Slowly, stories emerged suggesting that Harry and Meghan had stored data in multiple locations, even entrusted copies to allies. If true, the files weren't just leverage, they were insurance. And that terrified the palace even more. But the media war wasn't only about information. It was about timing. Every new leak, every fresh rumor, every carefully placed story served to remind the world something bigger was coming. The suspense was unbearable. People waited, day after day, for the big reveal. And when one journalist's investigation came dangerously close to uncovering the darkest twist yet, the palace knew they weren't just losing control of the narrative. They were losing control of the future. Because what that journalist found buried in the shadows wasn't just gossip. It was something far, far worse. And once that truth began to surface, even the royals themselves realized that the crisis had reached a point of no return. Betrayal always comes from the inside. And in the saga of Harry, Meghan, and the so-called royal blackmail files, betrayal wasn't just a possibility. It was inevitable. Because the deeper the crisis grew, the more people circled around them, waiting for their chance to trade loyalty for profit. And when friends began turning into enemies, the true danger of the files became clear. At first, it was whispers. Small leaks from people once close to Harry and Meghan, an ex-assistant, a distant relative, a Hollywood acquaintance who had shared dinners and laughs before the storm. Suddenly, those people were appearing in tabloids, their names cloaked in anonymity. A former friend, a palace insider, a close source. They spoke of tensions in the marriage, of Harry's inner turmoil, of Meghan's alleged threats. And each story chipped away at the fragile fortress the couple tried to build around themselves. Now pause and ask yourself, what makes someone flip? Is it money? Fear? Resentment? For those who turned against Meghan and Harry, it was all three. Money, because tabloids will pay fortunes for the smallest crumb of scandal. Fear, because anyone linked to the files knew they might be dragged into court or the press if the contents ever came out. And resentment, because not everyone who once stood beside the couple liked the way they were cast aside when Harry and Meghan moved on. Imagine Meghan's fury when she realized that people she once trusted were now feeding the narrative against her. For a woman who built her power on controlling the story, this was the ultimate insult. She could handle palace attacks. She could handle media smears. But betrayal from friends? That cut deep. And Harry? He must have felt it even more. For years, he had clung to a small circle of trust. Former army mates, school friends, the rare confidants who saw him not as a prince, but as a man. To see even some of them distance themselves, or worse, turn, must have been devastating. Harry, who already carried the scars of losing his mother, now watched his inner circle fracture like glass under pressure. But the most dangerous betrayal wasn't the casual friend or the old aide. It was someone closer, someone who knew about the files, someone who had seen, or heard, enough to give the press exactly what they wanted. A reason to believe the files weren't just rumor, but real. Let's pause here. Imagine the effect of that betrayal on Meghan. She had wielded the files as leverage, a silent threat to keep the royals in check. But once others began leaking details, the leverage slipped from her hands. Suddenly, she wasn't the sole gatekeeper of the secrets. The more people whispered, the less control she had. And that's where the danger multiplied. Because once a secret leaves the circle, it can't be called back. Copies spread. Journalists dig deeper. Enemies circle like sharks in the water. And Meghan, who thought she was the hunter, began to realize she might be the hunted. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was strategic. The leaks fueled the palace's counterattack. With former allies now speaking against Meghan, the narrative shifted. She wasn't just a woman fighting for survival anymore. She was painted as a manipulator, a schemer, someone even her friends couldn't trust. But here's the cruel irony. Meghan may have been betrayed, but the royals weren't safe either. Some of the very same people who turned on Meghan also began whispering about the monarchy's secrets. Old grievances resurfaced. Former aides, long silenced, saw an opportunity to cash in or settle scores. And in their stories were hints, tiny slivers, of what the files might hold. Now let me ask you directly. What would you do if you discovered one of your closest friends had betrayed you? Would you fight back, expose them in turn, or retreat deeper into silence? For Meghan, the answer seemed to be both. She distanced herself publicly, dismissing stories as lies. But behind the scenes, the whispers say she grew more paranoid, more determined to tighten her grip on whatever leverage she still had. And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Because when Meghan finally realized just who had been leaking information, it wasn't some distant acquaintance. It was someone closer. Too close. A person she thought she could trust with everything. But by the time she uncovered the betrayal, it was already too late. The damage had been done. The files were no longer hers alone. And that betrayal set off a chain reaction that would drag the monarchy even deeper into crisis. She was gone, but her shadow still lingered. Queen Elizabeth II had always been the anchor of the monarchy. The steady hand, the unshakable presence, the one constant through decades of upheaval. Her death left a void that nothing could fill, not Charles's cautious reign, not William's future promise. And yet, in the storm surrounding Harry, Meghan, and the so-called royal blackmail files, whispers began to surface that the late queen had not left the monarchy unprepared. Some said her silent hand could still be felt, guiding or warning against the crisis that was now unfolding. Think about it. Elizabeth reigned through the Diana years, through Charles and Camilla's scandal, through Andrew's disgrace. She had seen the worst of the crown's public humiliations and survived them all. Do you really believe she never considered what secrets might lurk within her family, or what could happen if those secrets ever came to light? Some insiders suggest the Queen had always suspected that Harry, her beloved grandson, but also her most unpredictable one, was keeping records. After all, she had watched Diana do the same. It was said that Elizabeth once told a close aide, "It is not the scandals that ruin us, it is the proof." Proof. That word haunted the monarchy, because rumors could be ignored, but evidence could not. And perhaps that's why, in the twilight of her reign, Elizabeth allegedly put safeguards in place. Quiet measures, hidden documents, secret instructions to her most trusted courtiers. She understood, maybe better than anyone, that the survival of the monarchy wasn't guaranteed. It depended on control, on the ability to outlast storms that might drown anyone else. Now, pause and consider this. What if the Queen left behind warnings specifically about Harry? Imagine the files she kept, the notes she wrote, the private briefings she gave Charles and William. She had seen the bond between Harry and Meghan, seen how it pulled him further from the family. She may have feared, deep down, that the boy who once adored her could one day become the man who threatened everything she had built. But here's the irony. For all her foresight, even Elizabeth couldn't stop the tide once she was gone. Without her, the monarchy lost its shield. Charles lacked her authority. William lacked her mystique. And Meghan knew it. That's why her alleged threats landed with such force, because the one person who might have contained her was no longer there. And yet, the Queen's silent hand may still be shaping the battle. According to whispers, she ensured that certain records that could counter Harry's files, were preserved in palace vaults. Not to destroy him, but to protect the institution if the worst ever happened. Imagine the scene. Meghan's team preparing to unleash recordings, only to discover that the monarchy had its own arsenal of receipts, its own way of fighting back. Let me ask you directly, do you believe the Queen anticipated this crisis? Do you believe she left Charles and William the tools to survive it? Or do you think she underestimated Meghan's resolve, trusting too much in Harry's loyalty? Whatever the truth, one thing is certain, Elizabeth's absence created a vacuum. For 70 years, she had kept the family's darkest secrets locked away, hidden beneath her stoic smile. Now those secrets were at risk of spilling out, and the crown had no matriarch left to hold them in check. And here's the chilling thought: even the queen herself,